An eventful week for the Boston Bruins, a retirement, a suspension, and a lot more on the ice as well. Ian McLaren of Locked On Boston Bruins joins us to break it all down and tell us where this team is headed and what the consequences are of everything that happened this week.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Gil Martin, glad to be with you, and thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome back to the show Ian McLaren of Locked On Boston Bruins. Busy week, lots going on for your team. Let's start with Tuukka Rask retiring. Tell us why he did that, and more importantly, what does it mean for the Bruins going forward?
Yeah, well, Tuukka Rask, he had last season he was playing with a bit of a hip issue that he had corrected in the offseason, pretty major surgery, and the hope was that he would be able to go through a rehabilitation process and get back to where he wanted to be in terms of, his elite level of goaltending. So we went through a months-long recovery process, was gradually ramping up his off-ice workouts, got skating, eventually got to the point where he signed a one-year contract with the Bruins, made a few appearances, but in his last one against the Anaheim Ducks, he felt some discomfort and ultimately decided that, he couldn't be at his best for the Boston Bruins, for his teammates, and the level that he wanted to be. So he ultimately decided that, based on all that, he's hanging up the skates and calling it a very successful career when it's all said and done, for sure.
No question about that. And so in goal now, what do the Bruins do to compensate for the fact that their plans have changed?
Well, Don Sweeney, he kind of got ahead of it in the offseason by signing Linus Ullmark to a 4-year deal worth $5 million per season. Kind of raised a lot of eyebrows to give him that big of a commitment. But now he's basically the starter for the Boston Bruins for the foreseeable future. They also have Jeremy Swayman in net, who is very young, very talented, has really excelled in his limited time with the Bruins, and he is really the goalie of the future for this franchise, and he's getting the opportunity to be, kind of a 1B starter to Linus Ullmark at this time. And really, it could go either way as to who takes the reins down the stretch. If Ullmark, struggles a bit, Swayman's there to carry the load. But I believe right now they're kind of hoping that Linus Ullmark does step up and take the reins. He got off to a bit of a slow start with the Bruins, which is understandable, coming to a new team, a new city, a new system. But he's played pretty well since kind of the beginning of December, around the Thanksgiving mark. Last week, the Bruins, for a variety of reasons, didn't perform very well on the ice, but I think they're pretty comfortable right now with this tandem of Ullmark and Swayman going forward, and that should be the tandem for the next few years at the very least.
How does a young guy like Swayman handle the emotions of being sent down and then Rask retiring and him coming back up? How has he handled it so far?
I mean, one of his strengths has been his kind of unflappability. We saw that early on in his playing days. He was not very easily rattled. And I think he and Ullmark both understood the reality that Rask could be back at some point this season. So it wasn't really a shock to anybody when he did come back. Like I said, he does have fairly limited experience at the professional level. So to get some regular playing time down in the AHL for a goalie of his age, not a step back per se, just an opportunity to refine his game, work on some things. And he really credited Rask for being a bit of a mentor in their limited time together. And certainly Rask's unflappability really rubbed off on Swayman as well. So I think in the end it was unfortunate that it didn't work out for Rask, but things have kind of settled into what we had kind of expected early on in the season. And Ullmark and Swayman have a very positive relationship, it seems. They really push each other and become kind of famous for their after game hugs on the ice. And I think they're going to really work well together.
You also have an eventful week with Brad Marchand's suspension, 6 games, pretty long suspension by the NHL. Your thoughts about it, and now his reaction to it that has sort of changed since it initially went down.
Yeah, I mean, initially when he was called for a match penalty, it was obviously apparent that he was going to be suspended for some time. I think the 6 games is more a reflection on his history, the fact that he had already been suspended once this season, rather than the act itself. Obviously, it's egregious to go after a goalie like that. I would have thought maybe, 4 or 5 games would have been appropriate, but the 6 really wipes him out for a road trip that they're about to go on, and an important game against the Colorado Avalanche later this month. He was pretty outspoken the other day about his disagreement with the ruling. He's appealing the suspension. He really thought it was more of a reputation decision than anything else. And I mean, that probably is the case. If it wasn't Brad Marchand, it probably would have been a lighter sentence. But at the same time, you do have to factor in the fact that he was suspended already this season. I believe he now holds the record for most suspensions, overtaking Chris Pronger's previous record. Not something to be proud of at all, for sure. And I believe it was the NHL kind of saying, obviously you didn't learn your lesson when you were suspended back in November. You really need to smarten up. He admitted that it was a stupid play, an emotional play. The Bruins are disappointed in him. He was spoken to by general manager Don Sweeney. So, just a really kind of boneheaded decision by him. And while I do think it's too long, I do hope as well that he does kind of learn something from it. But the way he was talking the other day kind of suggests that he didn't really think that the punishment fit the crime, for sure.
No question. Ian, why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers where they could find your podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, the podcast is Locked On Boston Bruins. You can find it on any podcast feed as well as on YouTube. And people can find me at Ian C. McLaren on Twitter. And the podcast is Locked NHL Bruins on Twitter and on Instagram as well.
All right, Ian, always a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gil. Take care.